reminds me of winter recordings when it was so cold. It's like no matter what I wore, I was always cold out there. Good?
Sort of. I honestly can't get YouTube or Facebook to actually trigger the start when they're supposed to. But we'll go ahead and do it. And it says it started, and I'll have to upload it to one or the other if it doesn't do both.
No, absolutely.
So it's recording though. So welcome. Thanks for coming by today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. So this is Royce Freeman. He's got a new documentary coming out, and so he came by the Two Floridian Studios to speak with us about it. We appreciate that. So thank you much.
Thank you.
Heard about it through Rights of the Father, I believe, if my memory is correct, right?
Oh yeah, one of the actors in that film, Dean Philippi. I've known him for years. He was in my second feature in Utero, and he played a cop. And I reached out to him recently and had him interviewed for this documentary. And I started to follow more of his work, and I saw that he was on this show, and I thought it'd be good to cross promote. It's like, well, it was one of your guests that you had for another project, and he's in this project.
Oh, so
Awesome.
cool. So he played a policeman in
Yeah,
one of your features?
he played a policeman. The project in Utero is kind of like a Rob Zombie, kind of gritty grindhouse a thriller, hostages and bad people, and the bad people get pulled over by the cop, and everybody has to play it cool so that the cop can just go about his business and nobody gets hurt, and well, it's a horror movie, so he probably doesn't make it. Yeah.
So,
the reason I saw it's absolutely not important or anything, but he played the judge, right, in the Rise of the
Yeah,
Father.
he played a judge in that.
There's like a thread. Everything.
And he had a police uniform. He just brought it. He brought his police uniform to play the cop in my film. He just had one.
has anybody checked on what he does? Maybe he's a police officer who became a judge.
Maybe.
I mean, we did ask him if he was a real judge.
Yeah, he's a very good actor.
He in the documentary has a clip of this, but there's a filmmaker, Richard Kodai, and he does a lot of film festivals, or he used to do a lot of film festivals. And one of the films, I think, is called With Bloodshot Eyes. I think it's the name of the short film. And Dean plays what turns out to be the president, but you don't know that. Spoilers. No, but it's a guy in a bunker who's drinking and smoking heavily, and there's a phone by him, and his shirt's undone, and he's in disheveled, and his hair is all messy, and you don't know what is stressing him so much out. And then by the end, he gets the call, and then you find out that he's it's like it's wartime, kind of thing. He's stressing about what he needs to do. But you hold off and don't tell the audience that he is the commander in chief. So he got to play a multi-dimensional person, not just I'm playing the president, and that's just a one-dimensional thing. Because every time you see the president in a movie, he's in a suit, he's on Air Force One, and it's so political or it's so militarized. This is just about a flawed human who has to make a hard choice, kind of thing.
I like that. What's the name of the movie?
I think it's called With Bloodshot Eyes. But I know the director is Richard Kodai, and there's links to that stuff on his Facebook page and on I think YouTube. Yeah.
Okay.
And are each of these films shot here in Jacksonville?
Primarily Jacksonville, St. Augustine area. I mean the greater Jacksonville area. But I didn't know this until I moved here that what we all call Jacksonville, because of course there's marshlands and there's the boondocks, but the entire Jacksonville greater area, you could fit the entire state of Rhode Island nestled right into Jacksonville, Duval, and all of its outskirts, and have room, because Jacksonville is the largest mass city in the country.
Yeah. So the name of the documentary, The First Coast Cinema World?
First Coast Cinema World, named after the fact that they refer to our area as the First Coast, because I think the settlers, when the Columbus and all those ships, I think they settled in St. Augustine before anywhere else.
Was it St. Augustine or Fort Caroline? St. Augustine. Because actually, there were so many ships. I feel like were coming, right?
Yeah, I
Like
think
Yeah.
it was St.
French and
Augustine, and
Spanish,
then the Huguenots came up to Fort Caroline.
okay, so
Yeah.
still, yeah.
But they settled in St. Augustine, and the fort here got conquered, got basically knocked down a few times and moved around, so it wasn't really a continuous settlement or.
Yeah, I wonder if we should call it not settlers, but more like colonizers.
Invaders.
Invaders. Yeah.
Aliens.
Yeah.
But let's go. Let's go back to the
Illegal
beginning.
aliens.
So Royce, you mentioned off the record, I mean, before we started recording, that you are not from Jacksonville.
No, my mother and father, they met in New York, and my dad's not even from New York. My dad's from Georgia and Wilmington, North Carolina, and he got into photography and things like that, and served in Vietnam. And when he got out of Vietnam, he started to parlay and do film stuff. And he met my mother in New York. Or actually, I don't know if they were in New York or New Jersey, but in that area, he met my mom. My mom was a flower child, little hippie girl. What's funny, he's a Gentile family, non. I, well, my mom was Jewish, so and my dad was non-practicing Christian. So, but it's funny that he's a Southern conservative, and she was a kind of a liberal Jew, hippie, and so it's an interesting combination. So I got raised in both environments because I don't know if you've ever lived in an area where your in-laws kind of live across the street in the building across the street. So they kind of come and go as they please. They just kind of show up all unannounced at your house. My my mom's family parents lived in the same building, so they came and visited all the time. So I got to see my mom's side of the family, which was the Jewish heritage, and my grandfather Sammy was a proud man of faith, and he would bring my brother and me to Temple Shul on Saturday. Because what's funny, in the Gentile faith, the Sunday is the high holy day, but in the Hebrew faith, it's the high holy day that is Saturday. So my grandfather would expose my brother and me to that world, and then my dad being a filmmaker. So I got exposed to all kinds of stuff growing up in New York.
So cool. Which area? Was it New York City or New York State?
Well, it was New York State. Living, and it was Queens and Manhattan. I think my when I was a baby, we lived in a apartment building in Manhattan, and then when I got older, we moved to Queens. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. It's also kind of very turbulent. Well, not turbulent. Very kind of volatile time in those neighborhoods, right? When you were
Yeah.
growing up.
I don't remember the Manhattan environment, but where I lived in Queens, from the time they moved to Queens to the time we left New York, was the same place, as far as my memory. And it was kind of, it wasn't a suburban area, but it was a regular, brick building in a neighborhood. I don't think that it was a rough neighborhood. I don't remember any of that, but it was. I mean, they let us play outside. So if it was really rough, they probably wouldn't let us do that. So
Right.
I feel like it makes it like the backdrop of Sesame Street could be Queens.
yeah, I think that
Oh,
Sesame
really?
Street is supposed to be Queens or someplace like that.
Is it really?
Well, I think I know it's New York. I know it's supposed to be New York, but
Yeah.
but I don't know exactly where that's supposed to be. But it definitely isn't there like a shot in Sesame Street where you can see past the buildings like the Brooklyn Bridge or something like. There's one of those shots on Sesame Street.
I don't know. I'm not quite as up on the lore, but I got that feeling. That was the vibe I got from.
Oh yeah, yeah. It was. I think it was New York where they shot it. I know Mr. Rogers was shot in Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, but
Okay.
Philly area.
Yeah, cool. Well, yeah, we're glad you moved down here because your documentary, I think, gets into the history of this region in film, right? And all the way back to the silent film era. Is that correct?
When I first moved here in 2004, I was not aware of the history of where I was moving to. Because actually, I moved to Orange Park, which
Mm.
is Clay County.
Mhm.
And I didn't venture into Duval County except for whenever friends said, "Hey, let's go to the bar, or the club, and the beach, and
Mhm.
this kinds of stuff." So I wasn't aware why it was called the First Coast. I wasn't aware that this was the silent film hub before Hollywood was Hollywood. Things were here, so I started getting into film without any of that knowledge. I just kind of jumped in the deep end and started swimming. My first feature, Rapture, which is a horror film, um, I got to make that film because a friend of mine, Tom, came into some inheritance and he wanted to make a film. And he said, "Let's make a film." And my buddy Kurt helped write it and he acted in it. And we shot it at my friend David's house. He happened to have his large property. And it was tailor made for us to just write a film to shoot there. And but it wasn't with any of these people in the Jacksonville film community because I didn't know that there was a
Mm.
Jacksonville film community. I just put ads into online,
Mhm.
and David and me cast some of our friends. My friend Kurt came from Miami. He was in it, and he brought some of his friends,
Mhm.
and so it was just kind of this, kind of a family affair. It was we're casting these unknowns, and it took so long to make that film that over that time I got to meet people, and we premiered it originally in 2014, and then later we revised and made a director's cut, and we premiered it like 2 years ago. But um, every project got me introduced to new people,
Mhm.
and then I worked on that project, and then it introduces me to new people. So again, I started doing this documentary in 2022,
Mhm.
something like that. And it just occurred to me. I was sitting on the couch with my wife and we were watching something. It could have been a documentary on Netflix, it could have been anything, but I don't remember. We were just sitting there and it just occurred to me, like when you have a lightning in a bottle thing, you don't even know where the idea comes from. It's just something about that makes you think of this. And I was like, we've been going to all these film festivals, we've been doing the 40-hour film project and all these things. And I'm starting to hear about this history that Jacksonville's had. And I said, I've never seen anybody chronicle that history and put it into some comprehensive form with
Mm.
all, well, there might have been little pieces done on like an NPR or a
Right. Yeah.
PBS
Mhm.
where it was more formal and not done for entertainment value. But I'm like, there's so many people in this film community that I've worked with. They are characters. If
Mm.
you get them talking, there's jokes and shtick,
Mhm.
and they're all flavor. So you're not going to get a Walter Cronkite kind of thing. You're going to get people with all kinds of wild personality. So I said to my wife, I said, "What do you think about me doing this long form project? I don't know how long it's going to take to do, and I don't know how long the film will be,
Mm.
but I want to do a love letter to my community." And she says, "Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile project." And then so I involved my dad. In fact, that call was funny. I was like, "Dad, I know you're probably busy, blah blah blah. Why don't you give me a call when you can?" And he thought that it was something important, like, "Is everybody okay? Is the baby
Right.
well, actually, the baby wasn't even around yet." But he says, "Is the wife okay? Is family okay?" No, 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 it's nothing like that. I have an idea for this project. And the moment I told it to him, you could hear, when you're on the phone with somebody, you can't see if they're smiling,
Right.
Mhm.
but you can hear when somebody says something, you can hear that's probably coming from a smile.
Mhm.
There's just something about the voice. And he was like, I think you definitely should do this. This sounds like it could be a very worthwhile project. Um, and then I started contacting all the people the major players, like certain people like Adam Madrid and Monique Madrid. They
Mhm.
do the film festivals, they run the 48, and Richard Kodai and this guy Chad Hendricks, a bunch of people, these filmmakers that have been doing meaningful work, and they all were like, absolutely yes. But the reason that all this got started is that in 2014, this guy Richard Kodai, he started doing this showcase at the. I don't know, have you been to the Sunray Cinema, or do you know
Mhm.
about? Okay,
Oh yeah.
and then unfortunately they're closing,
Mhm.
because of big business. Big
Mhm.
business wants them to do something that they probably don't want to do. As far as, I mean, we don't actually know what it is. We're all speculating, but
Yeah.
we somehow think, and it's never right to assume anything. They you know what
Mhm.
they say, but
Mhm.
we think that because the owners are such artistic people, they're not about big business and making it. You're making the theater look like every other multiplex. You go to
Right.
Sunray, it's very wholesome and artsy and stuff. I have a sneaking suspicion that the reason that they can't stay has something to do with the guy jacked up the rent and probably wanted him to turn it into something he didn't want to turn it into. I'm just guessing. But the when they did the short film showcase, Richard Kodai said, I want to bring all these filmmakers together and let them show their short films. And because when you have a premiere of a project, if you have one project, well, the only people going to come are people that are interested in that one project, and then the cast and crew and families and friends of that one film.
Mm.
If you have 20 short films, those are 20 movies. They might be only 5-10 minutes, but that's still a movie.
Mhm.
It's a project. So you have 20 projects of cast and crew and friends and fans. So you can pack the theater, and they were always packed.
Mm.
And he did that for several years. Monique and Adam Madrid, these filmmakers that actually, Adam Madrid won the 48-hour film project, which is a contest they do nationally, and they have it in Jacksonville too.
Mm.
He won that, I think, in 2014, and he wanted to start a film festival with his wife, and they wanted to do it exclusively comedy. And
Oh,
Richard
that's
was
tough.
Richard was getting, I think, kind of burnt out from doing the film festival so much because sometimes he was doing two a year, and he said,
Mm.
I don't know if I'm going to continue to do that. Why don't you guys kind of take over? It's like a soft reboot. Like his showcase became the LOL.
Mhm.
I mean, they were going to do the LOL anyway, but I don't think they wanted to have both happen at the same time. So I think
Mhm.
Richard said, I think you should hand the torch over. Um, and in 2017, I think, was the first LOL, and they do that every year. And because of the success of that, they got asked to be the city producers of the 48-hour film project, which that's nuts. Have you ever heard of what that is?
Yeah, I have.
Well, I saw the trailer. Well,
Well,
teasers. Yeah.
yeah, I know only from Bryce Howard put in a submission to it, um, and I know that you have to make a film in 48 hours
Yeah, I mean, you have no way to plan anything other than getting your
because they give
team.
you a topic.
Yeah, and they give you a topic, the line of dialogue you have to use, and you can't change the line. It has to be exactly that line. And you have a prop you have to use, character, and the name. And so they tell you this guy's name is Bill, and he's a cop, and it has to be Bill and a cop, or whatever it is. Now, what's interesting is, and every so often, there's filmmakers that do this. Now, it's tricky because if you try to reinvent the wheel, the judges have to appreciate the irony.
Mhm.
If they're like, I don't think that you've done it the way we've asked you to do it, or if they think that you've been a smarty pants and you're like, technically this is that, and
Mhm.
you might get brownie points for actually being subversive and trying to, do it your way. But that's a crapshoot. If you try to get outsmart the house, the
Mm.
house always wins in Vegas. So if you're like, well, technically this, it's like, well, the judges have to appreciate that. But
Mhm.
every once in a while, the judges do reward bold thinking.
Yeah, so people have submitted things where, like, you do like a script. Maybe you say, "Oh, I'll just do the whole thing like I just received this script and then I'm reading it." Um, Different concepts. What have you seen done?
Um, well, as an example, there's a comedy group. I know that they're still kind of doing stuff, but I haven't seen anything lately. But it's called Mad Cowford. Because actually, it's funny. Jacksonville used to be called Arlington, Florida, but Cowford actually it's a name of, like, I think Jacksonville was called
Mhm.
Cowford or something.
That's
Mhm.
right.
So Mad Cowford, and they're a comedy sketch group, but they do zany stuff. And their 48 that they did one year was, I think they drew, because they give you a piece of paper that has two choices, and you can
Mhm.
combine them or you can pick one or the other. They drew silent film and musical. So they decided to do both. Um, they did, like the old time silent films that have like the ragtime music going on. You know, it's not in widescreen, the black's on the sides, and it has that old timey look. And they have,
They were
like this
playing and
really, Benny
singing
Hill
and
music. And they don't have dialogue. Every time they want to cut to what's being said, they cut to a black screen with like the laurels, and it has the dialogue on the screen. So it has all that going on. Well, the story was the all the villains always wear those little bolo hats, and they have suspenders and these little sleazy mustaches, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
they're always those guys. They're always like ha ha ha. Like just old timey Laurel and Hardy stuff. And they went to the lady's house because the lady baked these really amazing pies, and the guys were coming over, and they really wanted something else from her,
Mm-hmm.
but her baked goods was the metaphor.
Right.
And they had an island in the middle of the kitchen, and they literally were chasing her around the island. Like the stereotype of, you hear the secretary chasing the boss chasing the secretary around the office. Kind of
Mhm.
like kind of thing. So they had this ragtime music playing while these sleazy guys were chasing her around trying to get her pies, and but they won, I believe. And it was funny because it was a silent film musical, and so I think that that's actually very cool when they take an idea and they combine ideas and they make some hybrid,
Mm.
some concoction, some amazing stew that is delicious.
Reminds me of the fun of drama class I used to love when you would try to combine random things and have to just go with it. I don't know what that exercise was called, but it was a lot of fun.
Didn't they do? Don't they do that on like the show? Was it Whose
Whose
Line Is
line
It
is it?
Anyway? They have to just throw you something that comes out of nowhere,
Right.
and then those guys are always like having to change the script and come up with a new scenario, and weave around it gets ridiculous.
When I saw that show, I wasn't sure if my drama class copied that show or that show copied my drama class.
Was it at school, your drama class?
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't a good one. It was one they let anybody in. But yeah, I always thought it was the most fun. It was one of the most fun. I didn't like school very much, but I liked drama class because I thought those exercises were very entertaining, and they always led to some great jokes and things that became funny on and on and on.
I had a drama teacher. I had many different teachers that did this, but as long as we didn't make an example of this and get the teacher in trouble, um, the it was a safe space. So, I mean, we couldn't curse like sailors and anything ridiculous, but the teacher said, "Look, you're here, and this is a trust exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm letting you. We're all here. We can be vulnerable together. I'm gonna let you kind of be emotionally and at your core naked. I'm gonna just you can be your true self." And
Unless your true self is actually naked.
yeah, and which I've actually heard from a lot of actors that have done live theater, that a a theater group, a troupe, like a
Mm-hmm.
family environment, that at some point it's co-ed. It's like, look, we have to quickly change our wardrobe. We don't have time for any of this. Look, yes, it's. I'm not wearing clothes. Get over it. I mean, and it becomes clinical, like doctors being in a doctor's environment. It's like you're not looking at somebody and thinking
Right.
something else. You're like, that's just Bill over there. He's getting dressed. It's nothing. Like I know one guy that does sound for some projects, and he does DJing at a dance club. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and he goes, I went over there one time to pick up some paperwork and stuff from him, and I walk in and the music's going, the dancing's happening, and I kind of just out of the corner of my eye see an eyeful, and I don't know how you get any work done around here. He goes, it's nothing. I see it every day, all day. It's nothing. It does nothing for me.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting. that you can become numb to. You work in any environment, and you can become it becomes like white noise. You just
Mm-hmm.
kind of filter it out.
I think playing with that is a big part of your profession. When you make movies, one of the amazing things about cinema and is the part that you don't show is the implication of a story, is the components that you've framed the aspect to grab the focus in order to basically pull off a magic trick.
Well, it's all magic trick. I mean, there is no motion in motion pictures. There is the illusion of motion. Back if you're starting off
Mm.
with Thomas Edison creating a film camera, um, there it's 24 individual snapshots, like a flip book. It's 24 frames a second.
Mm-hmm.
There is no motion. It's the illusion of motion, which actually, when technology got so good that now we have HD and 4K and stuff like that, if you ever go to a cinema, and I don't know why they would do this, but certain movies they project them at like 48 frames a second or whatever, like when the movie the Hobbit films came out, and certain films like that. You ever watched a movie, and because we're so used to a certain 24
Mm.
frames a second look, it's there's a little bit of a blur, but you don't see the blur, but it makes it have this dreamlike haze that it's not real, because a flip book is like,
Mm-hmm.
it's fake. You ever watch If you watch something at 48 frames a second or more, it's too smooth. There's no blur.
Mm.
It's like watching a pay-per-view fight, like a boxing match or whatever. It's all so smooth and
Mm.
so crisp. It's too clean. It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Film is magical. When you go to a movie theater back when it was film, depending on where you're sitting, you hear this very faint, this little
Mm-hmm.
clicking. Very, I mean, the sound booth, it muffles most of it, but there's a very faint in
Mm-hmm.
the air, the clicking of the projector, and then the light is shining from the projecting booth onto the screen. But if you look up, there's like dust particles in the air, and the light is cutting through that, and it's leaving this. It is like a magical experience. The idea
Mm-hmm.
of going to a dark room, sitting with a whole bunch of people, most of them you don't know, and if you'll forgive this analogy, I've heard people refer to going to a cinema as kind of a church. They don't mean it literally, but they said it's a spiritual experience for them, because they're sitting there, much like when you go on a
Mm-hmm.
Sunday to do the same, a different thing for. But you're sitting there, and the lights go down. You're sharing this fellowship with this audience, and you're all experiencing the movie together. But much like comedy, um, not everybody finds the same joke funny. So it's not like on cue, like when you watch like a talk show, and it tells the audience
Right.
applauds.
Mm-hmm.
They want you to applaud because they're telling you that's the joke, and the host or the guest just made a joke, so everybody all laugh. But if they didn't have that, you might find something that's funny, and I may not, or vice versa. So you go and watch a movie, and the shark jumps out of the water, or the monster gets this, or whatever, or there's a joke, and it's amazing to sit there, especially if you're the filmmaker and you've made the art.
Mm.
To sit there, it's so rewarding to hear everybody go ah,
Mm-hmm.
or to hear everybody, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so cool because you're the puppet master. You did that,
Mm-hmm.
and I have found that many artists say this, entertainers, not just film, but creating something, and it's result oriented because a comedian wants the laugh, the horror maestro wants the scare, um, and you can play the audience like a fiddle. You can be the puppet master, and if you do your job well, you have manipulated a group of people to bend to your will, and but in a passive way. You're not doing anything harmful. You're doing your job so well that you're actually creating some world, and breathing life into it.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
right. Somebody's asking a question here. Let me see if I can. I can't quite read it from there.
Well, It's interesting. I'm glad you.
It's not
No.
relevant to us.
But it was one of my friends saying Royce talks too much.
um, well, no, I'm glad you said that last sentence because as you started like manipulating, probably sound like, ooh, I'm not sure, like this and then when you said like you basically create this whole world and you convince for the duration of the film or movie this audience that this is a real experience they're going through, like this magical world you created, you invited them and they're in a way submitted to the, let's say, to the plot, to the flow of this magical plane that you created. I think, yeah, I think it's really beautiful. But is this your first documentary? Because you mentioned early films that were all feature.
I have loved documentaries for as long as I can remember, and
Because you like to learn.
oh yeah, I mean, and it's fun. There's some movies like my wife jokes around that like if I go to the store or if it's on Best Buy, or Amazon, if there's the bare bones Blu-ray DVD and it doesn't have anything except the movie, and then there's $5 more. There's this stacked disc that has commentaries and deleted scenes and documentaries. I'm going to spend more money to get that stuff. And there are classic movies that I love that I've actually watched the documentaries on the disc more than the films. Because there's a whole bunch of
All about director's cuts.
oh yeah, well there's a whole bunch of documentary filmmakers that they've made their living chronicling, other films. Back in Laserdisc days and early DVDs, I don't remember how to pronounce his name. Is Laurent Bazereau, I think. He did all these, like on Jaws, Close Encounters, E.T., Indiana Jones, a lot of documentaries about Spielberg and George Lucas and those people. He would chronicle those films, and there's these award-winning documentaries by that guy. And there's other filmmakers too that do those things too. And I'm fascinated by it. And of course, a lot of those people that either the interview subject, because you can disarm. Again, just like with the word manipulate, that's disarm also sounds like it's a negative thing. But when you sit on a therapist's couch or you go on a talk show and Ellen or whoever is going to make you feel calm, at ease.
Yeah.
And that's what disarming is you're going to probably, if you have a good person that's the host or the therapist or whoever, if they're a calming presence, you are going to volunteer so much more that you probably never intended to. You might be like, "Oh crap, I can't believe I said that."
Right. Yeah.
But you willingly did it. No, and that's the thing about it's like my wife said that you lose every opportunity you don't take. So the worst that you can hear is no. I mean, or a variation on no. Some people are not nice about how they say no, but the worst you can get is no. But you're always going to get no if you don't try.
Well, as a filmmaker, though, I think what we're getting at here is you're basically a hypnotist. That's kind of the qualification, if you will, of doing it well. Is you're taking an audience and taking them out of what is otherwise a dark room with a series of still images in front of them that people would not find amusing or entertaining,
Right.
and then it becomes something. It comes to life, and in that thing that you made, the artifice that you created through your own process, you make something more real than reality because you can take an idea, isolate it, demonstrate it, and therein find something that gets to the heart of a matter or the truth within something in a way that you wouldn't have been able to do without cutting away everything else, without being that hypnotist.
Well, it's an illusion. You watch some movies and you see the behind the scenes, and like when you go to a live theater, and then they build the sets. They're flat. They call them flats, and and then there's the backdrops, and the curtain comes down, and then they just fly those away, and then the next set comes in, and then there's the next scene. Well, it's all an illusion. There is no Like there's no more set off stage on either side. Same thing with the frame. There are movies that are literally like, we only need to see this couch.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't build anything over
Right.
here, you know. They just point the camera at the couch, and if you move the camera even slightly, you'd see craft service table, or over here you'd see a desk, you know, the office. It's all fake.
Mm-hmm.
But people surrender, you know, the suspension of disbelief.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Like what you
when you
said.
go to a magician, they're not. See, he's not really sawing the person in half, you know, because the person's still alive and well when the show's over.
Most
So
of the
so it was yeah. So it wasn't. So it didn't. You know, the person really. It's an illusion.
Yeah.
So people want, if they're going to put down their hard-earned money to go see the comedian or the magician or the film, they know it's not real unless it's a documentary. But then even we know now. Well, what's the thing that Uncle Ben says to Peter Parker is that with great power comes great responsibility. You can, as a documentarian, be truthful, or you can do what some documentarians that are a little bit more propaganda based is they take a comment of you and they take a comment of something else that's unrelated, and then it makes it sound like you're talking about that, but you weren't talking about that.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's
always
documentaries that push a really far agenda, and they're trying to, you know, make change or make things worse, you know. But there's documentaries that they are fueled by the filmmaker's agenda to do whatever.
I think we always have to look at the agenda of the source. I mean, I personally like to go to movies where the agenda is to make the comfortable uncomfortable and the uncomfortable comfortable, as they say. That's the agenda that I like in a film. But everything has some agenda.
The Alfred Hitchcock, there's lots of movies where you will swear, like you could take a lie detector and you would pass because you would be convinced, and you'd be wrong, but you'd be convinced that you went and saw this movie and you're like, oh my God, it was a bloodbath, like, or there was so much nudity, or there was so much whatever, and then you watch the movie and you actually slow it down and you watch what you thought you were watching and you watch it in slow motion and you see the magic trick. You're like, no, there was no nudity. There was the suggestion of it, or there was so much implied graphic bloodshed, but you never saw a drop of blood. But because of the volume of whatever it is, you're convinced that you saw more than you ever saw. And that's the magic trick. Is in Psycho, that poor girl in the shower, you think it's a massacre. I mean, she doesn't make it. It is a massacre, but you never see the knife touch the skin.
Yeah.
Everything is sleight of hand. It's all magic.
I thought it was really brilliant how Danny Boyle dropped frames in 28 Days Later during the zombie attacks to create a strobing effect in the theater, because what your brain fills in those missing frames is more grotesque than anything he could make or manufacture.
There's a filmmaker, I won't name him because I don't know if, I mean, he said this openly, but I don't want to out him. Went to a premiere of his film. It was an amazing film. And him and the composer were on stage and they were talking about, it's going to sound worse than it is because they actually were offhandedly refer to this music in this way, but I don't actually know if it is. But there's certain, because like with sound, there's the frequencies and hertz, and then there's the lower the frequency is like sub frequencies, something you can't really hear. I think
Subharmonic.
Well, like dogs can hear certain things on a doggy whistle, but we can't hear it.
Ultra harmonics and subharmonics.
Yeah. There are certain pieces of music that are considered the devil's chord.
Ultrasonics.
There's certain pieces of music or chords that they refer to. I think this is what he said. It's called the devil's chord, and it's because at certain sub levels, certain music actually is meant to be an affront. Like the musician will literally play it, and you unknowingly are being intruded. Like you're not allowing the musician. You're not giving permission for the musician to do this. You're not giving consent to the musician to actually cause you discomfort at a core. But there are musicians that do play things at high frequencies or really low frequencies, knowing I know for a fact that it's going to upset your stomach. I'm doing this on purpose to make you completely moved.
Well, dissonance, for example, commonly do that. The beginning of Twilight Zone was famously this way. That da-da-dee-da-dee-da that starts out the Twilight Zone is a famous dissonant tone that's known to cause a lot of discomfort.
The bad guy, Freddy Krueger, his red and green sweater.
Mhm.
The director said, I looked in a book of colors, and it said the retina to the eye retina, this shade of green and this shade of red put next to each other. This is the hardest combination for these colors to be put in, and just doing it will cause the audience harm. It will disturb the audience more than anything I could ever do. And it's interesting, I hear that. I mean, I ask you this, I'm a filmmaker. Would you be upset to know if a filmmaker said, I read psychology books, and I know for a fact that by putting this music in the movie or this color on screen, it will harm your psyche. It will make you feel worse about what you're seeing than you would want to feel. It's going to scare you. It's going to scare you in your soul.
Isn't that I believe that's the point of almost every movie I've gone to.
Would you, if the filmmaker did research and knew for a fact it would have that desired effect, would you feel upset knowing that he wanted that result?
Compelled.
Then he was going to do that because he wanted you to feel that way.
I would be compelled.
Because I think
I would not be. I would be the opposite of upset.
Precisely, there are people like Bill who will be compelled, and he will like, oh, totally get it going there. And I would be like, I'm gonna pass because when I was young, I used to watch movies like this, and it gave it.
But I mean after the fact. If you watch the movie and then the filmmaker admitted, okay, there's a piece of music in there that is a no. It's no. It's considered taboo. It's considered very sensitive because of how it could affect something. And I chose to put it in there on purpose because I wanted the audience to get that effect.
No, I wouldn't be upset again as long as, let's say, I'm looking at the whatever trailer or description. And it's not something that I will automatically not go to. Let's say it's a thriller, right? Psychological thriller. Totally down because, as you said, it creates that experience, that suspension of the disbelief. That
you're not going to put that music in Bambi. You're going to put that in a horror movie.
Right. I miss watching movies before I already knew everything about them. Now in the modern era, it's impossible to have happen anymore.
Do you see the magic? Like, do you see? Oh, that's fake. I know how they did it. Yeah. That's nonsense. It's not real.
I even saw when I watched Fight Club. I was so when I saw some movies in the era of, for example, Fight Club, I got to see them before I ever heard about them because back then you could get movies on the internet long before they were ever even publicized.
Yeah.
Where now filmmakers are smarter than that. They don't put it together till the last minute.
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to make a finished product and sit on it for a year for everybody to leak. So, but anyways, when I was watching Fight Club, I was over at somebody's house who had downloaded it, and it was way ahead of it coming out. So I had no idea what I was watching. I was like, what is this movie with Brad Pitt and Edward Norton? I was like, this is like a major film. But there's like there's frames missing and something else in between. And I saw it like immediately. So I notice all that stuff because I'm used to looking at things around 400 frames a second.
Yeah.
And I'm used to high resolution, high frame rate things from video games.
Like with TV, and only certain people that are techie people would know about this. My friend Dave, he services film projectors. So like whenever he buys a new TV, he doesn't just hook it up and ready to go. He'll calibrate the TV. He'll play with the settings. Like he'll put on a movie that he knows is supposed to look a certain way, and he'll like freeze it, and then he'll adjust the blacks. He'll make it so he'll use something that is a good reference, and it's like, this is how I know this is supposed to look, and he'll adjust it until it looks the way it's supposed to look. I do there's a cycling rate, like, but I don't know, it's 60 hertz or whatever it is. There's a cycling rate of the electricity that if you change it, it'll actually improve the image. But most people, there's a lot of technology that right out of the box, for everybody, it's going to look weird, maybe.
How interesting. But
Yeah, you can increase the voltage to a lot of equipment, and it improves it. That's what I did with my airsoft gun, and I made it insanely powerful.
So you hacked it and you made it work to how you wanted it to
I
be.
made it operate 4 times as fast, so now it fires 90 rounds a second and sounds like a steady stream when it comes out. Instead of sounding like a gun firing, it just goes. Eh. You just hear it like,
So you turned it into a minigun, you know.
yeah, metal storm, except it's plastic metal storm, so plastic storm.
Is it okay to go back to?
Yeah, no, we should. Yeah, I know.
Well, because we were talking a lot about feature, right? Like the magic, like documentary
Yeah.
is sort of like the complete opposite, right? You want to actually convey or compile and share a certain truth, right? Or a certain view.
Oh yeah, and this is I thought naively because all I know is watching the finished documentaries. Um, and actually, to speak to a point, you asked if I had done other documentaries before. The two feature movies I made, when the distributor said they wanted the movie, they were going to put it on DVD, and they said that, no, do you have any bonus content, deleted scenes, or whatever? Well, I had shot all these interviews with the people on those projects on set or after the fact, just for posterity. And so I said, yeah, I can give you guys like a 30-minute or 45-minute making of. So I made documentaries of both of my own features, which is interesting because I made documentaries about my own film. So on one hand, I was very qualified to do it because I knew the right questions to ask all the people because I knew everything that went on. So I knew what to ask, what not to ask, and in the editing, I also knew how to, get the most impact by cutting this out and doing this, doing this. So when I'm doing a documentary about something that's not me, I have to come at a different perspective because I was interviewed for the documentary. So it's very weird editing the documentary and then you have this one folder that has all of my stuff in it. You're like, well, how much should I be in this documentary? Because you don't want the audience to be like, because when I interviewed some people early on, I went to the people I knew I was going to interview and that they already were not suspicious, and they gave me truthful interview. And there were some people, because there isn't a need outside of Jacksonville to showcase Jacksonville and talk about it. There were people in the community that were like, they weren't suspicious of me, but they were like, why do you want to talk to us? We're nobodies. I'm like, well, yeah, but we're big fish in our small pond. To us, we're somebodies. And that's what one guy, really big guy in town said, why is anybody going to care about who we are? We win 48s and we have the occasional film that goes on streaming on Tubi, but then that's it. No stars. I said, it's my job as the documentarian to make them care. It is my job to give them a reason to care about something. It's no different than any film that's not a documentary. Why does anybody watch anything? You don't have to watch anything, No movie has a right to exist. Art is not a right, so the artist, you're not entitled. Like, oh, I made this movie, people must watch it. No. So I have to give you a reason to care. So, I decided I was going to do this documentary, and I tried to use myself very little. I'm in it. I mean, I got interviewed for an hour, or probably more, but I did that because I don't know what I'm going to need of mine. And I was like, I'm going to be in there like a narrator every so often. I'll just come in and I'll pepper myself throughout, and I'll just have a comment here or there. But until I had everything else, I didn't know what I needed. So I answered every question imaginable about everything, just so I had it. And the movie is 90 minutes long, and we have 150 people interviewed in it.
Wow. So is it is it about the history of cinematography in Jacksonville, or it's about the cinematography scene today? Both.
Both. In fact, so I knew I was going to interview people at Norman Studios, which was the last studio still going, and it's a museum now. I interviewed some curators that work there. One of those filmmakers that does film. She's on the board there too, Devin.
Mm-hmm.
So I interviewed them, but that's the first 5 minutes of the documentary
Right.
is hearing about it, and then it's all about the modern era.
Mm.
I didn't come about to find this one major part of the story until way late in the game. This is filmmaker Chad Hendricks. He works with a lot of the people, the people that did Rights of the Father.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's worked with them, but the urban community, the positive community that is talking about African Americans and people of color, and
Mm-hmm.
just the positive representation of non-Caucasian artists in film. That's what Richard Norman was doing with Norman Studios, and Chad started doing that in the early 2000s, but with like flavor, zombies and rappers and just but still letting the artists that he's working with really tell the story. He's telling the story, but he's letting them tell their truths. And so I knew Chad, but I didn't know that about him. Somebody said, "Oh, and he was in Folio Weekly in like the early 2000s, and they called him the Eminem of Jacksonville." And I was like, "I didn't know that." And he says, "Yeah, and furthermore, the person that interviewed him for Folio said, you are aware that you're doing what this guy Richard Norman was doing," and he's like, hold on a second. He was doing it with like positive roles for doctors and pilots and lawyers. Mine's with zombies and rappers. He goes, yeah, but still, you are the only one that's putting you're telling stories, and you're letting all these different cultures and environments be in your films. And there wasn't anybody in Jacksonville doing that at the time, and he just kept doing that and inspiring all these other filmmakers. This guy Carlos Smith, he calls himself Los 2K. He's done this series of movies called the Soul Hood Saga, and has another movie he's doing now. There's a lady that works, La Villa, the Ritz Theater. She's a teacher in the art school in town at the Performers Academy, and she also does stage plays. Her name is Dr. Sean Powell, and but all these people know Chad, and Chad. All these people have said that if Chad didn't start doing it, he started a groundswell. He started a movement that other people who had stories to tell, they just didn't know that there was a venue to do it. And him blazing the trail gave them the motivation to tell their stories, and then just keep it going. So it was funny. So I had most of the documentary shot, and I also had like the first cut of anything is too long. It's always too long. And sometimes you don't even know what you have, because you put everything together, you're like, this thing's too long. But sometimes if you just take this out and move this here and just moving things around and taking little things out, suddenly the sculptor figures out that I can make the swan out of this ice. But you have this big block of ice, and you don't know there's a swan underneath, and you don't know how to get to the swan, because you're like, I got too much ice.
Sounds like you took us along for when we get to see it, for a journey through your discovery as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because you discovered many of these things, and in the process you've got it captured while it's fresh. I know a lot of times if I don't capture something when it's fresh in my mind, it's a different process later. It's a process more of what I created or what I wanted to say. But if I capture it when it's happening, then I'm more able to faithfully relay my impression initially, and maybe draw that out.
My wife is modest, and she wouldn't want too much attention, placed on her shoulders. But I will shout out and say that when we were at a certain stage in the process, it was late in the game, but because it drastically changed to what it is, it was in its infancy, because it went from here to here. She's like, so how's it going? And I was like, well, she goes, I don't want to see it till it's done, but give me the elevator pitch, give me the quick pitch. And I start telling her the story, because it's in chapters. It is still in chapters, but what it was before was Um, it talked about the silent film era. Then it talked about how the Hollywood came and made all these films in the early day. In the there was films in the 70s and 80s and TV shows and things here. And then tax incentives went away, and then the indie filmmakers started kicking in around 2000 and up until today. I was telling her all this stuff, and one of the things I mentioned was that the Richard Norman thing, and then I mentioned all this other stuff I was saying, and then I mentioned the Chad thing and how they said that Richard Norman and Chad, there was this connection they felt. And she goes, okay, hold on a second. In your story, because like at a comedian, they set up a joke, but then they pay it off. Mm-hmm. But if the payoff is so far away from the setup, the audience has now forgot about the setup. So they're like, they don't get why the punchline says funny because they don't remember the setup.
So you got to reinforce it, huh?
Yeah, so I told her, and she goes, how long from the time that you're talking about Richard Norman until you mentioned Chad and Chad's connection and relevance to how he's the modern Richard Norman? And I gave her a time frame. She goes, no, that's too long. It's too long. She called herself, I'm not going to make a point of cursing a bunch, but can I say what she said?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. She goes, because like when you're like doing marketing research, I'm Jim from Arizona. Like she says, I'm the asshole from Arizona. Okay, I'm your audience. And she goes, this is what I'm hearing you tell me. What I'm hearing you tell me is it's about a film industry that didn't want to film in winter climates, that came down to Florida and started making films in silent era. And Richard Norman started doing pro-African-American films, and he was a trailblazer. Yeah. And then I'm also hearing that 100 years later, there was a guy, Chad Hendricks, that started to carry that torch, but in the modern era, doing hip urban films with an urban flavor in the modern era. I said, yeah, that's pretty much what I'm saying. She goes, you have to, those two thoughts have to come right together like that. And so by knowing that one point, it drastically changed the restructuring of about half of the documentary, because I was like, okay, so what the documentary now is every chapter has a setup and a payoff in a different way. I had separate chapters for different points, but I realized a lot of those, like poetry, the stanzas rhyme. So I was like, okay, silent film, urban film, Hollywood film incentives, those go away, indie film. So now it's, urban film, silent film, Hollywood versus indie, 48, festival chapter, So I had a vision, but I had to tell it to an impartial person who I see every day and has a no filter. So anytime she has to give me constructive criticism or the tough love, she goes, all right, so you want to hear from the asshole from Arizona?
Why Arizona?
The Arizona, she says, you want to hear from the asshole from Arizona? And I can tell you, I was like, please do. Yeah, so
our work is always better with a good editor. My wife is certainly my editor, and I'm very appreciative, because I'm glad that the things that she catches don't get out to the public.
Well, my dad's the same way. My dad is my collaborator in Freeman Films, and I've worked with him since I started doing solo work in like 2010. And every time I work on something, he gives me, I'm just going to give you the truth, And he says, this shot was this, or the audio was this. And he goes, I'm going to be unfiltered when I tell you how I feel, because usually when he's dealing with the footage, he's having to. This is the expression every filmmaker hates, or especially if you're the editor. We're gonna fix it in post, or a sound person has to clean it up, right? Mm-hmm. Well, whenever the filmmaker on set is like, we'll fix it in post. The editor's like, oh, I want to choke that person that said that, because it's like, yeah, it's easy to say that, but then if you have to be the one to fix it in post, you might not say that, so
eventually you're painting a movie instead of having the thing to in its essence. Tell us a little bit before we run out of time. Let's cover a bit about the film festival. I want to make sure we cover where we can watch it. It's going to be at Sunray Cinema, right?
Sunray Cinema. Unfortunately, Sunray is closing its doors. Around I think July 6th. I could be wrong, but I think it's around July 6th. So we decided to want to premiere it there because my two other features premiered also there. And that's also where Richard had his short film showcase, which is funny enough. It's a 1-2 punch. July 1st, Monday, Richard's doing one more short film showcase. He hasn't done one in 7 years, but he said, no, if they're closing the doors, I want to have one last hurrah. So we're going to have the short film showcase. All these filmmakers are going to be 2-hour block of short films.
July 1st.
July 1st. And then July 2nd is going to be the premiere of the documentary. Which is funny. There's a chapter in the documentary that deals with festivals. So it deals with the LOL and then also Richard's short film showcase. Originally, before he decided to have his premiere, his short film showcase the day before my film, people in the audience were going to have this nostalgia of remembering something that they did 7 years ago, and that's the reason why a lot of them got into doing film. And Richard shows up to all these film festivals anyway, so he's always around. So the audience originally was going to be, when it references it, they were going to be thinking about something that happened 7 years ago. Now they're going to be thinking about something that happened last night. One last short film showcase. So, but we're going to be premiering it there. And there are some stokes in the fire, irons in the fire, there's another place that we're looking to do an encore presentation of the documentary. We don't know when or 100% if it's going to happen, but we're really trying to get one more showing also in an even bigger venue sometime in the summer. Because Sunray only holds about 160 seats, and we thought about this. We're like, even if every single person that worked on the documentary came, everybody, which it's not going to happen because everybody's got lives, but if 150 people from the documentary came, that only leaves 12 people. Right. That did the people. Well, the people that come are going to want to bring dates or friends or spectators. Well, and there's no reserved seats for, these are only for the 150 people that worked on the movie, and here's 12 other seats. Right. It's first come, first served. The theater is independent of me, so they're like, no, we're charging for these seats. I have no control over that. So the other venue we're looking at holds like maybe 400 seats. So we're looking like, yeah, if we can actually make that happen, then maybe we'll be able to have, even though the Sunray is an art house, it's a home cinema for all these filmmakers, it's a indie gala event. Other a venue that holds 400 seats, that's in a bigger venue, it might be more of a black tie scenario. Sunray is not as much of a black tie thing, and not because it shouldn't be. It's just it has a different vibe. Yeah, it's not a multiplex. It's not like that. But I've been working on this thing for 2 years almost, and I'm happy that it's finally completed because I've seen it so much. I'm starting to see double. Like this is nuts. I don't know if you've ever had to do this. So you send something, like any kind of media. You send something to a copier or a printer, or a disc is made, or whatever, but you have to check it. Every time you give a revision to the printer, you have to watch the whole thing. Yeah. You can't just fast forward to or flip over to see if the thing. There's all kinds of render errors that happen when you do anything, and it's not mathematical, and it's not something that's in your control. I've had to watch this documentary hundreds of times, especially right in the 11th hour. It's being rendered for the festival, and there was a couple of things I had to adjust for the theater. Every time it got adjusted, I had to watch it again. Like, I've seen this movie so many times. I'm like, I hope I don't have to watch this again for the next 2 weeks, because if I'm sitting in the theater, I at least want to be enjoying watching the film.
Right.
And if I have to watch it one more time, I'm gonna, my head's gonna spin.
Well, next time you watch it, I think we'll all be watching it with you.
So,
Yeah,
So it'll be July 2nd.
July
and we can-
2nd.
people
which is
can
a
get-
Tuesday.
It is a Tuesday. At 6:45 is when they will let people sit down. 6:30, 6:45 is when they're going to let people sit down in the auditorium.
Mhm.
Get there early to get popcorn and all those things. But your
Yeah.
seats are reserved, so actually, if you show up
Right.
late, you still can get your seat. Like not like the old days where you're like you got to get in line, otherwise you no seats.
Right. Yeah.
But 6:45 is when I'm gonna get up and just thank everybody for coming, and then the movie will start at 7. 7 sharp. They're not gonna hold it. 7 is when they're gonna start the movie.
No
8
trailers.
No trailers. No.
I'm joking.
No. I wanted to show trailers, but the guy is like, "Oh, we're closing our doors at 6:30. There's on July 6th. There's no reason to put trailers," which I guess that makes
that's
sense.
true.
But so at 8:30, the movie will be over, and we have the venue until 9 because they have another thing they're going to play there. So he said for about 20 minutes, I could do like Q&A. If anybody wants to ask any questions, if they're not tired enough about hearing me talk about it here, if they want to ask any questions, I'll be able to answer them.
Okay.
We're looking forward
Great,
definitely
yeah,
to
definitely.
to seeing that.
Enjoy the video.
And tickets can be gotten from sunraycinema.com, right? People can-
Well, you go to sunraycinema.com. You have to navigate the page to find where it says tickets and stuff. But if you actually go to well, there'll be a link in this somewhere in this video feed, but there's a Facebook page for the event that I made,
Okay.
and a link to the the links for some things are like a mile long.
Yeah.
It's not a tiny URL. It's like all this
Mhm.
code.
But people can buy the tickets right there from the website.
Yeah, yeah.
From Sunray
Oh,
Cinema's
for sure.
website.
You can do that there or on
Um,
Facebook on the events page. Just look up First Coast Cinema World documentary, and on that Facebook page, it'll have
which is linked below.
Yeah, it'll be there, and you can go right there and you get the tickets. They're reserved seats. You can find seats. They may have amazing snacks and
They
drinks
do
and
have
things.
really good food. If you're going up to watch this, I got to say, out of all the theaters you can go to, they've got the best chicken sandwiches, pizza, things that are. I mean, a lot of
Vegan
theaters have that
desserts.
stuff, but they're well made. They're
And I will
actually
say
really
this,
good.
just because it's more of a modern concern than when I was a kid. Go to that theater. Don't feel you can't eat there because they have vegan
Right.
options. They have dietary specifics. I'm sure there's a gluten-free
And they
thing
make
too.
Yes.
they make them all there, so it's not that they get them from
Oh,
some.
now I want to go.
They're
to
not like from
cinema.
Doritos or whoever. They're all like they're made by the pizza place that's next door. So awesome, very cool. We're looking forward
Royce,
to that.
yes, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you for
again.
joining us.
Yeah, and like you have to tell people if a movie's rated R, rated PG, or whatever. There is some language in the movie. And we do touch upon sensitive subjects, like we literally talk about cancel culture. We talk about the artist's right to be representing truth, and that point about well, if real life has less than pretty elements, should you how accurate can you make that in your art? And if one person's offended by it, is that enough of a reason not to do it?
Oh, that'd be a great thing to talk about when we can have you back on. We could discuss that topic entirely for an hour.
For an hour.
Yeah.
The artist's right to for free expression. Just because somebody doesn't like it, just change the channel. If you don't like it, change the channel.
Yeah,
Don't make it so no one else can watch it.
Well agreed. Yeah.
Well, thank
So-
you for having me.
Yeah, thank you
No,
very much,
yes.
Royce. I appreciate it. And
Well,
I hope
looking
everybody
forward.
can get to see this documentary because I think it's quite interesting to really understand that Jacksonville's influence in film is great and few people know about it. So thank you for sharing
Only
that.
12 seats left because it's 150 just the cast.
Just the cast and crew. Get those seats while you can. They're going to
Yes.
sell out.
Yeah.
All right, thanks
Awesome.
again.
Thank you so
Royce.
much.
Very nice meeting you too.
Yeah.
No, that is exciting.